He uttered not a word as they ridiculed him, accused him, and passed judgment. But a single phone call altered everything. What kind of man wields the power to unsettle a courtroom without ever raising his voice? If that question echoes in your thoughts, you're precisely where you're meant to be. Let me guide you back to the instant he entered that courtroom, alone, misjudged, underestimated, and bearing a truth no one saw coming. The door swung open with the soft groan of aged wood, accompanied by the hushed anticipation of the room. A few heads turned. Most didn't. Men like him no longer commanded attention, yet he stepped forward, deliberate and unhurried, not with doubt, but with intent, as though time itself yielded to his presence, and no one else in that space had the authority to hasten it. His name was James "Jimmy" Reed, 79 years old. Though his frame still bore the sturdy outline of a man who had carried burdens heavier than stone, he wore a dark green flannel shirt, neatly pressed but worn, and trousers faded by countless winters. His boots, cracked at the seams yet polished with care, spoke of a man who met the world with unwavering resolve. In his weathered hand, he held a felt hat, soft and worn from years of use, held not for show but as a relic of memory, much like a soldier might cradle a flag. As he approached the defense table, murmurs began, subtle, indirect, but cutting as always. Another squatter. Here we go again. Why bother with this one? James Reed remained unmoved. He'd heard it all before, in bus depots, in waiting rooms, at doors he'd once crafted but was no longer permitted to pass through. He set his hat on the table, folded his hands with quiet dignity, and raised his eyes, not to the judge, not to the ceiling, but straight ahead, steady and calm. The docket listed his charge: unlawful occupation of condemned property. The court saw only a transgression. What they failed to see was the truth. He had spent less than an hour on the porch of the house he'd built with his own hands, the place where his wife once sang their daughter to sleep, where he repainted the trim every spring until arthritis made ladders too perilous. It was the place he last stood, holding his wife's hand as she faded away. On paper, the porch was no longer his. But the land remembered, and so did he. James Reed brought no lawyer, no rallying cause. He came alone, not because no one would stand with him, but because he refused to let anyone else bear this moment. He didn't avert his gaze when Judge Walter Grayson entered. He didn't shift nervously when his name was called. He'd been judged before, in grander rooms, for lesser reasons. But this time, he wasn't here to defend himself. He was here to test whether the system still had the courage to meet his eyes. What no one in that room could fathom was that James Reed, the man they scarcely noticed, carried within him the original blueprint for what justice was meant to be. Judge Grayson adjusted his robes with the mechanical rigidity of a man long past caring. He opened the case file with the casual flick of someone who believed he'd seen it all. Reed, James, 79 years old, charged with unlawful occupation of city property, he droned, a smirk curling his lips. Another case, same story. His tone wasn't cruel, it was worse, bored. Boredom strips a man of his worth. Let me guess, the judge said, not bothering to look up. No permanent address, no legal counsel, no steady employment in recent years, no respect for the law you keep breaking. James didn't flinch. At the clerk's desk, Priya Sharma paused. Something in the judge's voice prompted her to glance at the defense table. There sat James Reed, and a faint memory stirred, a younger man in a city meeting room, sleeves rolled up, pointing proudly at blueprints. She shook her head. No, it couldn't be. Yet she kept looking. Judge Grayson grunted. We don't have time for this, Mr. Reed. We need efficiency. This docket is full of people who think property rights are emotions. Finally, the judge looked up, narrowing his eyes at James, but he didn't see a veteran or a builder. He saw what he chose to see, an old black man, tired, alone, on the wrong side of the law. Let me be clear, Grayson said, leaning forward. The city owes you nothing. Memories aren't deeds. The courtroom remained silent, the kind of silence that feels like complicity. No one spoke up. No one objected, except perhaps in the way James Reed sat, not slumped in defeat, but grounded, as if his presence alone was a rebuke. Priya Sharma glanced at the docket again, whispering to herself, "This isn't what it seems, and he isn't who they think." Judge Grayson cleared his throat. "I'll make this quick, Mr. Reed. You have 2 minutes. Speak now if you have anything to say before sentencing." James didn't stand. He didn't reach for a prepared speech. He raised his gaze, calm and resolute, and said simply, "I'll speak when you're ready to hear me." The judge scoffed, leaning back. He reached lazily for the gavel. As one might swat a fly, he didn't deem worth noticing. But in the stillness that followed, the courtroom felt a subtle tremor, the kind that precedes a seismic shift. The judge barked again. "Mr. Reed, are you responding or wasting time?" James blinked slowly, then spoke in a voice so steady it seemed to thin the walls. "That house, it was mine. I helped build this city." The judge chuckled. "Built the city? That's rich." Across the aisle, young journalist Michael Vargas, fingers hovering over his smartphone, prepared to type something snide. "Old man claims he built city." Courtroom laughs, but something in James's voice made him pause. It wasn't a boast, it was a recollection. James continued, "I held a pencil before I could hold a book. I built walls to shelter the broken, rooms to comfort the grieving, spaces to hold people's final moments with dignity." His voice stayed soft, but each word landed like a stone. "I built places meant to heal. Now I sit before walls that judge." The courtroom didn't gasp, it breathed more slowly. Priya Sharma blinked rapidly, the old memory clawing its way forward. Michael Vargas lowered his phone. Judge Grayson tapped the file nervously. "So, you think your past justifies your trespassing?" James looked back, not with anger, but with profound weariness. "No, sir. I'm saying the law has a memory problem." The words hung heavy, heavier than any gavel. Judge Grayson muttered about sentimentality and banged his gavel without flourish. 30 days in county jail. The sentence landed hard and flat. James didn't waver. He checked his worn leather watch, then looked up. "May I make one call?" The judge sneered. "To whom?" "Your old drinking buddies." James said nothing. Procedure required the court to allow a call. A bailiff handed him a phone. James didn't hesitate. He dialed a number from memory, raised the phone, and spoke 3 words. "It's time now." He returned the phone, calm as ever. No one knew what he'd set in motion. Then, outside, the sharp, rhythmic click of heels on marble, steady, unrelenting. The courtroom doors opened with unhurried authority. In walked a woman, tall and composed, dressed in a simple black suit. No flair, no apology. Her name was Alicia Reed, James Reed's daughter. She moved with an authority that needed no permission. No one stopped her, not the bailiff, not the judge. She placed a hand on her father's shoulder, no words needed. From her jacket, she drew a slim leather folder and laid it on the defense table with quiet certainty. Inside were documents, property agreements, city commendations, architectural certifications, all signed, notarized, sealed. Each page proclaimed the truth. James Reed hadn't trespassed. He'd returned home. Judge Grayson's mouth opened, but no sound came at first. Alicia spoke, her voice clear and measured. "My father didn't ask for favors or pity. He asked to sit on the porch he built." Every word stripped away a layer of ignorance. When the judge finally croaked, "Motion granted," it didn't sound like mercy. It sounded like capitulation. The courtroom didn't cheer or clap. It exhaled, as if breathing anew. James Reed stood slowly, lifted his old felt hat, and placed it firmly on his head. He walked out, not in triumph, but in truth. At the threshold, he paused, turned slightly, and said, "Start listening. Start seeing." There was no bitterness, no anger, Just a reminder from a man whose life was too vast for any courtroom to contain. Because sometimes justice doesn't arrive with fanfare. It walks quietly, in worn leather boots, carrying only memory and the enduring weight of dignity.